Hello and welcome back to the Tata Still Chess Tournament, to another very well fought game, once again by Magnus CARLSEN himself, the champion. And he is facing Alexander Donchenko, a young German grandmaster. And similarly as before, again CARLSEN is actually about 200 rating point higher rated than his opponent, so he absolutely has to go for the kill. And well, this game is going to be again a very typical game of CARLSEN, where he is playing on and on in a seemingly dry position, and then at some point the position is going to just blow up, and then we will see what will happen. So let's get started with the game. So CARLSEN is with the white pieces and starts with e4. And Donchenko is actually a Najdorf player, so it's going to be an open Sicilian Najdorf. So the spectators could actually be quite happy because that's one of the sharpest openings. So d4, c takes, knight f6, knight c3, and with a6 we are having the Najdorf. And CARLSEN continues with one of the sharpest lines with bishop e3. Actually, in this same round, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave is known to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest expert of the Najdorf. He played from the backside against this bishop g5, e6, f4, and queen b6, this so-called poison pawn variation, comes queen d2, queen b6, and so on. And actually, Grandelius Nilsson, Nils Grandelius, who was with the white pieces against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, managed to beat Maxim in this Najdorf. So, but let's go back to the game of CARLSEN. So now comes bishop e3, and while there are multiple moves possible here, nevertheless, a true Najdorf player always plays e5 here. So now comes knight b3, bishop e6, and here comes sort of a new way of handling this Najdorf. CARLSEN plays the move h3, and after knight c6, there comes queen f3. So a normal way to play this would be to just play queen d2, or we start with f3 and then queen d2, and then you go for the long side, while the black is going to go for the short side, and then we are going to have a race. So, but CARLSEN played this h3, queen f3, and rook c8 castle. So now it's still actually well-known theory. Comes knight a5 and bishop g5. So the point of this whole thing is that white would like to take on f6 at some point and take a full control over this d5 square. Now comes bishop e7, and as far as I've seen in the database, now bishop takes f6 is a novelty by CARLSEN, even though I do believe that he figured this out over the board and it wasn't a home preparation. So black takes back with the bishop, and the point comes that white now occupies this d5 square. Now comes bishop g5 check, king v1, and here comes a interesting but very good move from Donchenko. So white's plan would be to further expand here with h4, g4, and so on, and black simply prevents this by playing the move h5. Now comes bishop e2, and Donchenko just goes further with h4. So Donchenko makes sure that these pawns are not going to be rolling. g4 he can just take if he wants, and that makes sure that his king, for the time being at least, is actually quite safe. So CARLSEN played the move knight takes e5, queen e5, and now comes queen b3. And here actually this is the first time I invite you to stop the video and try to figure out what was the point behind the move queen b3. It just seems like that you're attacking one pawn, but there is a lot more behind it. So of course this pawn does hang, but the point is that CARLSEN would like to play the move bishop g4, trying to exchange his bishop and try to go for a position where this d5 knight could dominate the g5 bishop. So after queen c5, now you cannot take this pawn, because this pawn hangs behind. CARLSEN plays the move bishop g4. And we are actually heading towards an endgame after queen c4. Now white is actually taking on e6, but in this case this e6 pawn is a very strong pawn, it takes control over the d5 square. So after knight b6 takes, and rook c6, and we can stop for a second to evaluate the position. So now the queens are off the board. We are having this ending where black's one and so far only weakness is this d6 pawn. Well, white would like to regroup, play knight c4, rook d3, double up, try to put pressure against this pawn, and in the long run try to push this c3, b4, maybe come up with the king somewhere this way, and try to do something on the queen side. Well, black has not a lot to do. Well, he needs to basically wait and defend. But we will see that Donchenko will have one nice trick in his pocket. So now comes knight c4, king e7, rook d3, and here he plays a very nice move. So it's quite obvious that this d6 pawn is going to be under attack, and you will sooner or later have to defend it from behind from d8. However, now black has the chance to insert a very nice move. And this move is rook f8. And the point is that now you're attacking this pawn, and essentially forcing white to play the move f3, but after f3 these squares are very weak. And we will see that the black counterplay, once the position opens up, it's always going to be against this g2 pawn. And once the g2 pawn falls, also all these pawns are going to be weak. So here comes bishop f4, rook d1, rook d8. So now all this maneuvering comes where Carlsen tries to improve his position. So rook d7, king c2. Now the knight goes away so that the pawn can be pushed. The rook comes back, king b3. Well, there's not much black can do, just repeats. Knight c4, rook comes back, knight a3. Of course, the point is to push this b5. And here comes the counterplay from the backside. So here I invite you to stop the video and try to find out what the counterplay is. So now that white actually put his knight into the corner, black has the chance to finally push d5. And the tactical justification is hugely relies on these pawns, because if white were to take here twice, seemingly winning a pawn, the point is that after rook d5 there comes rook g6, attacking this pawn. There is no way to defend because this bishop does also a good job of taking care of the d2 square, and once you take on g2 all these pawns are gone, and this is completely unplayable for white. It's black is just simply winning. So for that reason, for d5 you cannot take on d5 twice. Carlsen plays the move b5. But now black can just go behind the pawn, and this pawn is now protected. Carlsen exchanges on e6 and goes on with king a4, trying to go further. Now comes rook b8, and so the players are actually at move 35. Black was playing a bit slower and was in a bit of time trouble. Carlsen had quite a lot of time still left, and actually here white has a nice way to continue. I'm not saying that's particularly good, but there is a tactical chance here. So if you wish, you can stop the video again and try to find out the sharpest line for white here. So with this rook d8, this d6 rook became unprotected, and you can play the move knight c4. This attack this rook, also by the way protects backwards to b2, which was under attack. And well, actually here the best choice of black, which makes a very complicated position, is taking on c4, so sacking the exchange, and after rook d6 comes rook b2. Again, the point is as the g2 pawn is hanging, and there are quite a lot of complications arising after rook d8. Rook takes g2, now the white rooks start invading, and the position is very, very complicated. And even though the computer likes white here, it's quite understandable that Carlsen wanted to avoid this, because these pawns on the king side look quite quick. So, well, but it's still playable, very complicated, and still nothing is decided. So instead of this knight c4, however, Carlsen decided to play the move b4. Now comes rook c6. Again, you cannot take here twice because this pawn would be hanging. King comes back, doubling up on the c file. Again, the c3 pawn is under attack. Now comes rook a4. And again, it's move 38, and still black only has a little time left, but Donchenko finds the way to fight the strongest as he can. So here he plays the move rook c4. Of course, the idea is that you cannot take on c4 because this would be forking the king and the rook, and black ends up winning with a piece up. So after rook c4, the other point is you want to take on e4, and also the rook can then take on e4. So white plays the move rook a2, and here again, so this is very nice move again, a5 to continue on the on putting pressure on the white king. Well, there's not much else here to do than taking this pawn, and here Donchenko comes with rook b8 check, and after king c2, the rook goes back up, and now this pawn is protected, and he wants to take here. So here comes knight b1, rook b5 attacking this pawn, and so here actually Carlsen again found a very nice way to push the game on. So he takes first there, and then plays the move a6. And the whole point is that after rook a5, you can take. So now black would like to take his pawn back, put the rook, not f6, sorry, put the rook on g6, attacking this pawn, and it seems like black is doing completely fine. However, CARLSEN again finds a nice move to put further pressure on Donchenko. So here again you can stop the video if you want to figure this out, what was the nice way to go on. So CARLSEN plays the move c4. And the point is, of course, that you want to swing your rook around. So if black takes here, white just plays the move rook a3, and this pawn is going to be queen very, very soon. This is not playable. Donchenko has to play here. But after c takes d5, now comes rook a2, king b3, rook g2. The whole point was that after knight c3, now it seems that white is putting again up a lot of pressure against black, especially the black king. So white plan is to play knight e4, push the pawn to d6, put the king on d5, and just checkmate the black king. And this is actually how the game goes. So black absolutely has to get some counterplay, has to take this h pawn and has to push his own pawn. So now the game goes with rook g3, d6, king d7, very logical, knight e4 takes, king c4, and black activates with rook h1 and king d5. So this was the position that probably both players were evaluating once they entered this line with c4, and then c takes d5. And here actually black has only one way to draw the game. And of course the Donchenko, the young grandmaster from Germany, who is actually known to be quite good at solving these puzzles and studies, he found this move easily. So, but you can also check yourself and figure out whether you can find it yourself. So white's plan is very obvious here. Wants to play knight c5 check, go in with the king, put the rook around, or maybe just simply push the d7 pawn, and that seems like very, very scary. So black's only move here is rook c1. Now CARLSEN goes on with knight c5 check, and here actually black has multiple ways to draw the game. The simplest, and I'm quite surprised it didn't happen, is to sack the exchange, and after king c5, this h pawn is super quick. And if you come back with your king, the point is that after h2, rook d1, bishop e3, rook h1, you can actually sort of imprison this rook with bishop g1, and once the king takes here, the easiest way to draw is just to put your bishop back. Now you are threatening to take here, so taking on h2 would be a huge blunder because after bishop d6, this picks up the rook as well. So white has to play a move like king f5, and after bishop d6, this pawn is again protected, so white's only move f4, and after king e7, rook h2, king f7, this is a well-known theoretical draw. Black plays the move g6, put this bishop to e7 and f6, and well, that's it, the position cannot be won. So this was one way to draw. It would be quite interesting to know why Donchenko opted for another way, because he played a seemingly very dangerous move king e8. And here white has very many options to put pressure on black. So the moves that come to mind are, well, pushing d7, even actually king e6, that's the game continuation, or rook a3. So the point is, if you push d7, which just looks like completely crushing, after king e6, king d8, now you cannot yet jump with your rook because then the pawn would be hanging. You cannot go king e6 because then you leave your rook behind. That's so your knight behind. That's why it was very important to put the rook on c1. If you play the move king c6, it nicely protects the pawn. However, now you're not threatening to jump because you're pinned. And once black starts pushing, you have to move your king again, but then the black king just keeps checking you. And once you go back to the c file, they pin you again, and there is no way to make progress here, so it should be a draw. So this is one way to go on. This is quite a straightforward draw, so it's not what CARLSEN played. However, in my opinion, and the move that I checked first was rook a3, which looks very, very dangerous. So the point is that now you want to play king e6 and checkmate the black king. So if black plays the move h3, you go on, and then this is just checkmate. So let's say black takes the rook, the knight. This is over. So actually there's only one way here to draw for black, and the variation starts with king f7. So you cannot let your king to be pushed down to the back rank. And once you give a check here, again you have to come forward. And after knight d3, you actually have to let white queen. So after rook d1, king e4, there's no way to go back. Black has to push his own pawns. So becomes this race, and both players are actually queening at the same time. But there is actually not enough material. So in these positions, usually who gives the first check should be the one that actually checkmates. However, black has still enough pawns, because after queen e8, the king just goes back to h7. Looks like a king that actually castled somewhere in the middle game, and now it's actually quite safe. And after rook e8, again, actually the white king is pretty safe. And the only way to draw here is to start with rook e1, sacking the exchange, but here there will be a perpetual check. So this would have been a very nice variation, but unfortunately this didn't happen. However, Carlsen played the move king to e6. And the point is, which happened in the game, that after rook c5 there is rook a3, threatening the checkmate, and black's only way is to play rook c8, which is just blundering this fork, but this is actually not a huge issue, because after taking here and back, there is just not enough material to do anything for white. This pawn is going to be pushed down the board. So white plays the move rook a1, and this pawn is just pushed in. And there's nothing white can do here. They're going to exchange all the material. The thing is that also black cannot not do anything, because this even this h1 is actually the wrong color. So all white needs to do is exchange this pawn for these two pawns, and he can even give up the rook. So it's obviously going to be a draw. And then yeah, they just quickly finished up the game, and there is nothing left to be done here. So another amazing game, and yet again Carlsen could not win. So it's like maybe 4 games in a draw. Then he was just pushing as far as he could, but he was not able to win this. And actually all games were drawn except the one I already mentioned, the MVL game. So again, it's Niels Grandelius who's taking the lead with +2, and there are all these guys with leading with Carlsen and Caruana leading this group, chasing now Grandelius by half a point behind. And that's about it for this run, and see you next time.